Maybe a cheaper place would be better for you. Something more appropriate for your situation. Try McDonald's. My daughter-in-law Sarah said this with a contemptuous smile. I had arrived at the Terrace for a family dinner to celebrate my son Max's bank promotion. 5 chairs were occupied. None for me. Mom, Max said without looking at me, this restaurant is quite exclusive. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable. For 40 years I had worked as a domestic worker, cleaned strangers' houses, scrubbed bathrooms, washed floors until my hands cracked and my back curved. I had paid for both of my sons' private universities, bought them cars, gave them down payments for apartments, financed their lavish weddings, and now they were telling me I belonged at McDonald's. Then I began to laugh. A laugh that came from the depths of my wounded soul. I walked to the reception where Elijah waited, my trusted business partner for 15 years. I'd like the main table, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The one in the center. Elijah smiled. Of course, Mrs. Theresa. Your regular table is ready. The silence that followed was deafening. Because what they didn't know, I owned this restaurant. Let me tell you what happened next. My children had planned a family dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in town, but when I arrived, there was no seat reserved for me. My daughter-in-law Sarah smiled contemptuously and told me that a cheaper place might be better for me. I began to laugh, a laugh that came from the deepest depth of my wounded soul. Everyone looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Then I walked over to the owner and asked him for the best available table. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Elijah, my trusted business partner for 15 years, came closer immediately. My children didn't know that this elegant restaurant, where they had just humiliated me, belonged to me. That every dish they served, every glass of wine they drank, every cent they spent went directly into my bank account. I'm Theresa, 70 years old, and I've just discovered the true face of the children for whom I sacrificed my entire life. I became a widow at 30 with 3 small children, Max, Leon, and my little Lena, who died of pneumonia because I didn't have money for a private hospital. From that day on, I swore that my children would never suffer want. I worked for 40 years as a domestic worker. For 40 years, I washed, ironed, and cleaned strangers' houses while my hands became cracked and my back curved. For years, I got up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast for them before I went to work. While other mothers took their children to the park, I scrubbed strangers' bathrooms. While they enjoyed family vacations, I worked extra weekends to pay for their school trips. I paid for both of them to attend private universities. Max studied business administration, Leon engineering. I bought them their first cars, gave them the down payment for their apartments, paid for their lavish weddings. I gave them the life I never had, the life I dreamed of having but sacrificed for them. Max finished his studies and got a job at a major bank. He married Sarah, a cold woman who saw me as a threat from day one, as if I wanted to take away something she considered her own. Leon followed his brother's footsteps. He was always weaker, always needed someone to make decisions for him. 6 months ago, I retired. Officially, because in reality, I had already stopped depending solely on my salary as a domestic worker 15 years ago. But they didn't know that. Nobody knew. I prefer them to believe I'm a poor, dependent old woman. It's better to know people's true faces when they believe you have nothing to offer them. Sarah called me last Tuesday with that sweet, false voice she uses when she needs something. Teresa, dear mother-in-law, we're hosting a family dinner to celebrate Max's promotion at the bank. It will be at the Terrace. You know the place already. Saturday at 8 p.m. Of course, I knew it better than she could imagine. I arrived punctually, as always, in my best clothes, which for them was still the clothing of a domestic worker. I walked to the table where everyone was sitting. Max, Sarah, Leon, and his girlfriend Lena. 5 chairs were occupied, and none was free. Excuse me, I said. I think there's a chair missing. Max looked up from his wine glass and looked at me with that expression I knew all too well, that mixture of annoyance and embarrassment that always appeared when I was in the presence of his friends or colleagues. Mom, he said, we thought it might be better if you had dinner somewhere else. This restaurant is quite exclusive. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable. Sarah nodded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Exactly, Theresa. Maybe a cheaper place would be better for you. Something more appropriate for your situation. The words hit me like slaps. Leon said nothing, just looked away. Cowardly, as always. Lena seemed uncomfortable but didn't dare contradict Sarah either. The other guests lowered their heads in embarrassment at the spectacle they were witnessing. Then I began to laugh. A laugh that started quietly and grew louder, deeper, until the entire restaurant fell silent and looked at me. Max watched me with a mixture of confusion and panic, as if he had suddenly understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Sarah frowned, obviously annoyed because her plan to humiliate me wasn't going as she had expected. I walked slowly to the reception, where Elijah was waiting for me with that professional smile I knew so well. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I would like the main table standing in the center of the hall." Elijah nodded immediately. "Of course, Mrs. Theresa. Your regular table is ready." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Max's eyes widen, saw Sarah suddenly turn pale, saw Leon drop his fork to the floor. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Teresa, the domestic worker, had secrets that could destroy their world of lies and appearances. 15 years ago, while they were busy building their perfect life with the money I gave them, I began investing my savings. Not in just anything, but in real estate, in businesses, in places like the Terrace, the exclusive restaurant where they had just told me I didn't belong. But let's leave that for later. First, you need to understand who these people I call my children really are. Maybe a cheaper place would be better for you, something more appropriate for your situation. Try McDonald's. My daughter-in-law Sarah said this with a contemptuous smile. I had arrived at the Terrace for a family dinner to celebrate my son Max's bank promotion. 5 chairs were occupied. None for me. "Mom," Max said without looking at me, "this restaurant is quite exclusive. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable." For 40 years I had worked as a domestic worker. Cleaned strangers' houses, scrubbed bathrooms, washed floors until my hands cracked and my back curved. I had paid for both of my son's private universities, bought them cars, gave them down payments for apartments, financed their lavish weddings. And now they were telling me I belonged at McDonald's. Then I began to laugh. A laugh that came from the depths of my wounded soul. I walked to the reception where Elijah waited, my trusted business partner for 15 years. "I'd like the main table," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The one in the center." Elijah smiled. "Of course, Mrs. Theresa. Your regular table is ready." The silence that followed was deafening, because what they didn't know, I owned this restaurant. Let me tell you what happened next. My children had planned a family dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in town, but when I arrived, there was no seat reserved for me. My daughter-in-law Sarah smiled contemptuously and told me that a cheaper place might be better for me. I began to laugh, a laugh that came from the deepest depth of my wounded soul. Everyone looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Then I walked over to the owner and asked him for the best available table. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Elijah, my trusted business partner for 15 years, came closer immediately. My children didn't know that this elegant restaurant, where they had just humiliated me, belonged to me. That every dish they served, every glass of wine they drank, every cent they spent went directly into my bank account. I'm Theresa, 70 years old, and I've just discovered the true face of the children for whom I sacrificed my entire life. I became a widow at 30 with 3 small children. Max, Leon, and my little Lena, who died of pneumonia because I didn't have money for a private hospital. From that day on, I swore that my children would never suffer want. I worked for 40 years as a domestic worker. For 40 years, I washed, ironed, and cleaned strangers' houses while my hands became cracked and my back curved. For years, I got up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast for them before I went to work. While other mothers took their children to the park, I scrubbed strangers' bathrooms. While they enjoyed family vacations, I worked extra weekends to pay for their school trips. I paid for both of them to attend private universities. Max studied business administration, Leon engineering. I bought them their first cars, gave them the down payment for their apartments, paid for their lavish weddings. I gave them the life I never had, the life I dreamed of having but sacrificed for them. Max finished his studies and got a job at a major bank. He married Sarah, a cold woman who saw me as a threat from day one, as if I wanted to take away something she considered her own. Leon followed his brother's footsteps. He was always weaker, always needed someone to make decisions for him. 6 months ago, I retired. Officially, because in reality, I had already stopped depending solely on my salary as a domestic worker 15 years ago. But they didn't know that. Nobody knew. I prefer them to believe I'm a poor, dependent old woman. It's better to know people's true faces when they believe you have nothing to offer them. Sarah called me last Tuesday with that sweet, false voice she uses when she needs something. Teresa, dear mother-in-law, we're hosting a family dinner to celebrate Max's promotion at the bank. It will be at the Terrace. You know the place already. Saturday at 8 p.m. Of course I knew it better than she could imagine. I arrived punctually, as always, in my best clothes, which for them was still the clothing of a domestic worker. I walked to the table where everyone was sitting. Max, Sarah, Leon, and his girlfriend, Lena. 5 chairs were occupied, and none was free. "Excuse me," I said. "I think there's a chair missing." Max looked up from his wine glass and looked at me with that expression I knew all too well, that mixture of annoyance and embarrassment that always appeared when I was in the presence of his friends or colleagues. "Mom," he said, "we thought it might be better if you had dinner somewhere else. This restaurant is quite exclusive. We don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Sarah nodded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Exactly, Theresa. Maybe a cheaper place would be better for you. Something more appropriate for your situation." The words hit me like slaps. Leon said nothing, just looked away. Cowardly, as always. Lena seemed uncomfortable, but didn't dare contradict Sarah either. The other guests lowered their heads in embarrassment at the spectacle they were witnessing. Then I began to laugh. A laugh that started quietly and grew louder, deeper, until the entire restaurant fell silent and looked at me. Max watched me with a mixture of confusion and panic, as if he had suddenly understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Sarah frowned, obviously annoyed because her plan to humiliate me wasn't going as she had expected. I walked slowly to the reception, where Elijah was waiting for me with that professional smile I knew so well. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I would like the main table standing in the center of the hall." Elijah nodded immediately. "Of course, Mrs. Theresa, your regular table is ready." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Max's eyes widen, saw Sarah suddenly turn pale, saw Leon drop his fork to the floor. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Teresa, the domestic worker, had secrets that could destroy their world of lies and appearances. 15 years ago, while they were busy building their perfect life with the money I gave them, I began investing my savings. Not in just anything, but in real estate, in businesses, in places like the Terrace, the exclusive restaurant where they had just told me I didn't belong. But let's leave that for later. First, you need to understand who these people I call my children really are. My smile grew wider. Exactly, my children, for whom I sacrificed 40 years of my life, believed they had the right to publicly humiliate me in my own establishment. The cameras immediately turned to Max and Sarah. "Sir, is it true that you tried to throw your mother out of the restaurant?" they asked Max. His face was completely red, a mixture of shame and horror. We didn't know. It was a misunderstanding." "It was no misunderstanding," I interrupted with a clear, firm voice. "It was a calculated humiliation. They told me I should look for a cheaper place, more appropriate for my situation. They suggested McDonald's as an alternative better suited to my social standing. All of this in front of other guests to maximize my shame." The journalist's outrage was palpable. One of them turned directly to Sarah. "Ma'am, what do you say to the fact that you suggested your mother-in-law, who apparently financed your family's lifestyle, should eat at McDonald's instead of accompanying you to a family dinner?" Sarah stuttered incomprehensibly. It wasn't our intention. We thought she would feel more comfortable." Her words sounded pathetic even to herself. I had seen her use this manipulative tactic with me for years, but in front of the cameras, she was exposed for what she really was, a cruel and calculating woman. "But wait, there's more," I told the reporters. "A week ago, these same children who publicly humiliated me today came to my home to suggest I move to a senior home. In their opinion, It would be better for me to be surrounded by people my age instead of living alone in an apartment too big for a retired domestic worker. The cameras perfectly captured the expression of horror on Leon's face. "Mom, please," he begged. "Don't say that on TV. They'll think we're monsters." "You are," I answered without hesitation. "You're exactly the monsters I unwittingly created by giving you everything without teaching you the value of sacrifice." "Mrs. Theresa," asked an experienced journalist, "how long have you been planning this revelation?" The question made me smile bitterly. I didn't plan it. For years, I kept my investment secret because I wanted to protect my children from the envy and problems that money can bring. I wanted them to build their own lives on their merits, not on my wealth. But when I lost my job 3 months ago and didn't tell them, when I watched how they reacted when they believed I was in a vulnerable situation, when I saw that their first reaction was to get rid of me instead of offering support, I understood that I had raised 2 strangers. 2 people who only valued me for what I could give them, not for who I was. Max tried to approach me, probably to do some kind of damage control, but Elijah discreetly positioned himself in between. The manager had worked with me long enough to understand that this conflict had been building for years, and that he wouldn't allow anyone to interrupt it. "Ma'am," they asked Sarah, "did you know that your mother-in-law had these possessions and investments? Why do you think she never mentioned them to you?" Sarah looked at Max for help, but he was too busy avoiding the cameras. We always thought Theresa was just a domestic worker. She never told us she had money." "Exactly," I confirmed. "I never told you because I wanted to see who you really were when you believed I had nothing to offer you. And now I know. Now I know that the filial love I believed existed was actually economic dependence disguised as affection." A young journalist raised his microphone. "Mrs. Theresa, what will happen now with your family relationship?" My answer was clear and definitive. There is no family relationship to save. They made their decision when they publicly humiliated me. I'm making mine now. From this moment on, Max and Leon are no longer my sons, and Sarah is no longer part of my family. The silence that followed was ghostly. The cameras captured the perfect moment when 2 grown men realized they had lost not only their mother, but also the secret financial support that had sustained their lives for decades. The news went viral within hours. Videos of the confrontation in the restaurant circulated on all social networks, with titles like "Domestic Worker Reveals She's a Millionaire After Being Humiliated by Children and the Perfect," "Revenge of a Betrayed Mother." The comments were merciless against Max and Sarah. People were outraged by the extent of cruelty shown to a mother who had sacrificed everything for her children. The next day, Max received a call from his boss at the bank. The institution couldn't afford to have employees involved in public scandals due to family abuse. His image was completely destroyed, and his position at the bank untenable. He was suspended indefinitely while his future at the company was evaluated. Sarah faced even worse consequences. Her high-class social circle completely ostracized her. The wives of Max's colleagues, who used to invite her to their luncheons and exclusive charity events, now avoided her as if she were radioactive. Her membership at the tennis club was revoked, and her name was removed from the lists of the city's most important charity galas. Meanwhile, I checked into the most luxurious hotel in the city. The same one where years earlier, I had cleaned rooms as a domestic worker. Now I was occupying the presidential suite, looking out over the city from the 30th floor, and planning my next steps with the cold-bloodedness of a military strategist. Leon desperately tried to call me. His voicemails were pathetic. "Mom, please forgive us. We didn't know what we were doing. We can make this right. We're family." But true family doesn't humiliate publicly. True family doesn't abandon when they believe you're no longer useful. True family doesn't suggest senior homes as a solution to their own shame. My lawyer, Mr. Morales, came to the hotel Tuesday morning with a satisfied smile. "Theresa," he said, "I've reviewed all the documents you gave me."
"Indeed. Both Max and Leon are listed as beneficiaries of several of your investments and properties."
The apartment Max lives in, the car he drives, even his savings account receives monthly automatic contributions from you that they knew nothing about. "Perfect," I replied. "I want you to cancel all those benefits immediately. Let them support themselves as the independent adults they supposedly are." Mr. Morales nodded, visibly enjoying the case. I've also investigated their personal finances. Without your secret contributions, Max won't be able to maintain his lifestyle for even 3 months. The apartment he lives in is in your name. Technically, he's just a tenant without a contract. That same afternoon, Sarah appeared at the hotel, begging for an audience. I received her in the lobby, publicly, so she couldn't make a dramatic scene. "Theresa, please," she begged with tears in her eyes. "You have to understand our situation. Max will lose his job. We'll have no residence if you take away the apartment. We have debts, obligations." "How interesting," I replied with icy calm. "Now you're worried about the economic consequences. When I lost my job 3 months ago, your first concern was how to get rid of me, not how to help me. When you thought I had no money, your reaction was public humiliation. Now that you know I have resources, you come with crocodile tears." Max appeared behind her, visibly defeated. "Mom," he murmured, "I know we made terrible mistakes, but we're your flesh and blood. We're your children. You can't destroy our lives like this." My laugh echoed through the entire hotel lobby. "Destroy your lives?" Interesting choice of words. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply withdrawing the support you took for granted. You decided that Theresa the domestic worker shouldn't sit at your table. Perfect. Now you'll discover what life is like without Theresa the investor who financed your luxury from the shadows. You'll learn to live with your own resources, just as I did for 40 years while I supported you. Sarah tried one last desperate tactic. "Theresa, if you make this public, if you take everything away from us, you'll suffer too. People will think you're a cruel mother who abandons her children." My smile became even colder. "Dear Sarah, people already know exactly who abandoned whom. The videos are on all social networks. The whole world has seen how you tried to throw me out of my own restaurant." That night, I called Elijah from my suite to coordinate the next steps. The media wanted exclusive interviews. Television producers offered documentaries about my story. Magazine editors wanted articles about how I built my empire in secret while working as a domestic worker. But I had more ambitious plans. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about rebuilding my life without the emotional leeches who had drained my energy for decades. It was about showing that a 69-year-old woman could start over and be more powerful than ever. The next day, the next phase of my plan began. Max and Leon would discover that underestimating their mother had been the most expensive mistake of their lives. The digital war began when Max and Sarah decided to create their own narrative on social media. Desperately trying to save their reputation, they posted a tearful video on Instagram in which they portrayed themselves as victims of a vindictive and manipulative mother. Max spoke about how I had kept my wealth secret to psychologically control them, while Sarah sobbed about how a real mother would never abandon her children over a simple misunderstanding. This video gathered thousands of views within hours, but not with the expected reaction. The comments were brutal. People remembered perfectly the images of them throwing me out of the restaurant and suggesting McDonald's as a more appropriate alternative for my social class. Their attempts to portray themselves as victims only worsened their public image. But I had something they didn't know about. For years, every time they visited me at my apartment, every time they made disparaging remarks about my work or my lifestyle, I had recorded our conversations. Not out of malice, but because my memory wasn't the same anymore, and I wanted to remember the important things my children told me. I never thought those recordings would become my most powerful weapon. Elijah helped me create my own YouTube channel. At 69 years old, I became an influencer out of necessity. My first video was titled "The Truth Behind the Crocodile Tears." I posted it on a Thursday night, and by Friday morning it had 500,000 views. In the video, I played the audio recordings where Max literally told me I was a financial burden, where Sarah made fun of my cheap clothing in front of her friends, where Leon suggested it would be better for everyone if I moved far away, because my presence embarrassed them when they had important visitors. The most devastating recording was from 3 weeks before the restaurant incident. Max had supposedly come to visit my apartment, but actually wanted to check my finances to calculate how much it would cost him to keep me in a senior home. In the audio recording, you could clearly hear him rummaging through my drawers looking for bank statements while remarking that people at my age often develop dementia, and it was important for the family to control their resources before they wasted them. The public's reaction was immediate and devastating for my children. Theresa justice became a worldwide trending topic. Thousands of people shared their own stories about ungrateful children, sacrificing parents, and dysfunctional families. My story had touched a universal nerve of family pain. International media began calling me. CNN wanted an exclusive interview. Univision offered me a 1-hour special. Netflix came to me with a proposal for a documentary about my life. Suddenly, Theresa the domestic worker had become a global symbol for maternal dignity and intergenerational justice. Meanwhile, the consequences for Max and Sarah multiplied exponentially. The bank where Max worked published a press release completely distancing themselves from him. They couldn't afford to have their corporate name associated with someone who had publicly humiliated his elderly mother. His dismissal became final. Sarah lost her part-time job at the art gallery. The owners, an elderly wealthy couple, felt personally offended by her behavior toward me. Her social circle had completely excluded her. None of her former friends answered her calls. Leon tried to publicly distance himself from his siblings by posting a video in which he apologized and claimed he had been against the bad treatment of me from the beginning. But I had recordings where he actively participated in conversations about putting me in a senior home and made fun of my attempts to dress elegantly for their family events. His apology video went viral for the wrong reasons. People mocked him as a coward for trying to save himself by throwing his siblings under the bus, for lying so brazenly when audio evidence of his complicity existed. Lena, his girlfriend, broke up with him after the scandal affected her job as a teacher. The parents of her students didn't want their children taught by someone connected to a family that abused elderly people. The social pressure became unbearable for her. On Friday night, I received a desperate call from all three of them. They had lost everything: jobs, relationships, reputation, social circles. They begged me for a meeting to reach some kind of agreement. They wanted me to retract the recordings, to make a joint video about family reconciliation, to stop the media campaign that, in their opinion, was destroying their lives. I told them we could meet on Saturday at the Terrace, in my restaurant, on my turf, on my terms, not to reconcile, but so they could hear the conditions under which we could coexist on the same planet, without me continuing to publicly reveal every misfortune. They arrived punctually, physically and emotionally destroyed. Max had lost 20 pounds in a week. Sarah had deep, dark circles under her eyes and had completely abandoned her elegant pretensions. Leon seemed a shadow of himself. They sat across from me at the same table where they had tried to humiliate me a week earlier. The irony was delicious. Now they were the ones who didn't belong at this exclusive place. Now they were the ones who looked out of place, uncomfortable. Defeated, they had one last chance at redemption, but the conditions would be very specific, very humiliating, and completely non-negotiable. I looked at them as they sat across from me like scolded puppies, and I felt a strange mixture of power and sadness. These were the babies I had held in my arms, the children to whom I had read bedtime stories, the teenagers for whom I had worked double shifts to pay for their whims. Now they were strangers begging for mercy from the woman they had tried to destroy. "Good," I said in a calm voice. "You will listen to my conditions without interruption. First, you will make a public apology video explicitly acknowledging each of your actions. No generalizations, no euphemisms. You will say exactly how you treated me, why it was wrong, and why you deserve the consequences you're facing." Max opened his mouth to protest, but I stopped him with a look. "Second, you will repay every cent I invested in your lives over the last 20 years. The apartments, the cars, the weddings, the universities, the vacations, everything. My lawyer has already calculated the total sum including interest. $800,000. Sarah's face completely fell apart. "Theresa, that's impossible," she whispered. "We don't have that money." "Of course not," I replied, "because you never learned to earn it. You've lived for decades as parasites off my sacrifice. Third, you will work to pay off that debt. I have several businesses that need cleaning staff, maintenance personnel, kitchen staff. You will start at the very bottom as employees earning minimum wage." Leon finally found his voice. "Mom, you can't force us to work as domestic workers." I completed his sentence. "As what I was for 40 years to support you." "Exactly that. You will learn what it means to get up at 5 in the morning, to work until your hands hurt, to come home exhausted without energy for anything else. Fourth," I continued, "you will live in the same building where I lived when I was raising you. Small apartments, simple neighborhoods, public transportation. You will experience exactly the living conditions I had while you enjoyed luxury paid for with my sweat. Sarah began crying uncontrollably. "This is pure revenge," she sobbed. "This is cruelty." "No, my dear," I replied. "This is justice. Revenge would have been leaving you on the street without the possibility of redemption. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn my forgiveness, but you'll do it the hard way. Fifth, you will attend mandatory family therapy, not to reconcile immediately, but so you understand the depth of the damage you caused. Sixth, you will perform community service in senior homes. You will take care of people my age who have been abandoned by their families, so you understand exactly what you wanted to make me." Max tried to negotiate. "Mom, let's be reasonable. We can't fulfill all these conditions. This is too extreme." My laugh echoed through the entire restaurant. Extreme was suggesting McDonald's to me when I came to a family dinner. Extreme was wanting to put me in a senior home without consulting me. Extreme was publicly humiliating me in my own restaurant. Seventh, I continued relentlessly, you will sign legal documents renouncing any rights to my estate after my death. You will not inherit a single cent. My wealth goes to charities that truly help working mothers and abandoned elderly people. The silence that followed was absolute. The three looked at each other, mentally calculating whether they had any option left. They were right to be afraid. Without my secret financial support, without jobs, without social circles, they faced total ruin. Eighth, should any of you try to manipulate the situation, leak information to the media to portray yourselves as victims, or break any of these conditions, I will publish the rest of the recordings I have. And believe me, there's enough material to destroy any possibility of public rehabilitation you might have. Sarah looked up with desperate eyes. How long would we have to fulfill all this? Until I believe you've learned the lesson, I replied. It could be months, it could be years. It depends on you proving to me that you've truly changed, not just that you're pretending remorse out of desperation. Ninth, you will move this week immediately. Elijah has already prepared the rental contracts for your new apartments. They're modest but dignified places, similar to those where I lived when you were children. You will learn to live with tight budgets, to appreciate every dollar you earn. 10th and finally, you will work 6 days a week in my businesses under the supervision of managers who report directly to me. You will receive no special treatment, just because you're my children. In fact, you will be evaluated more strictly than any other employee, Leon asked with a broken voice. And if we fulfill all this, will you really forgive us? Can we be a family again? I looked at him firmly before answering. I don't know, Leon. Forgiveness can't be guaranteed. It must be earned day by day through consistent actions, through genuine humility, through profound character changes. You destroyed something that took decades to build. Rebuilding it, if at all possible, will take a long time. Max asked what they were all thinking. And if we refuse to accept these conditions? My smile was icy. Then I continue the media campaign. I publish the rest of the recordings. The videos where you make fun of my clothing, laugh about my attempts to fit into your social world, plan how to get rid of me. Believe me, you have material to keep this scandal alive for years. The three looked at each other again. They had no choice and they knew it. Either they accepted my conditions or they faced total ruin with no prospect of redemption. After 2 hours of tense silence, Max was the first to speak. We accept, he murmured with a broken voice. We accept all your conditions. Sarah and Leon felt defeated. They had no alternative and they knew it. It was either this or total ruin without the possibility of redemption. Elijah, who had been waiting at a nearby table, came closer with the already prepared contracts. Every clause was detailed, every condition legally specified. There would be no room for misunderstandings or later manipulations. They signed with trembling hands, sealing their fate for the next several years. On Monday morning, their new life began. Max was assigned to the cleaning team of my offices. The man who a week earlier had worn $1,000 suits now wore a blue uniform and carried cleaning supplies. His former bank colleagues saw him mopping the lobby floors, and the humiliation in his eyes was visible from across the street. Sarah was assigned to the Terrace's kitchen, the same restaurant where she had humiliated me. She started washing dishes, peeling vegetables, removing grease from the grills. Her hands, which previously only knew expensive creams and weekly manicures, now cracked from industrial cleaner and were cut by kitchen knives. Leon was tasked with maintaining my properties. He repaired pipes, painted walls, trimmed gardens. The physical work exhausted him at the end of each day. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to earn his money with honest work. The first weeks were brutal for them. Their bodies weren't used to intense physical labor. Max complained of back pain from bending over to mop floors. Sarah cried secretly because of burns from hot oil on her arms. Leon developed calluses on hands that had previously only known computer keyboards. But the hardest part wasn't the physical work, but the constant social humiliation. The Terrace's customers recognized Sarah from the viral videos, and some took photos of her washing dishes. The images circulated on social media with mocking comments about how the woman who considered herself too elegant for her mother-in-law had fallen. Max faced the morbid curiosity of his ex-colleagues. Some walked by the building just to see him mopping, to confirm that the successful bank manager was really working as a janitor now. His photos appeared in WhatsApp groups with messages like, "Look how the one who threw his mother out of the restaurant ended up." Meanwhile, I moved into a villa in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. A property I had bought years earlier but never inhabited because I didn't want to arouse suspicion about my true financial situation. Now free from maintaining the facade of a poor domestic worker, I could openly live according to my true circumstances. The house had 10 rooms, expansive gardens, a pool, and a panoramic view of the city. It was everything I had dreamed of in those decades of living in small apartments and working in strangers' homes. For the first time in 40 years, I had domestic workers who worked for me instead of me working for others. I hired Joanna, a 50-year-old woman who had lost her job during the pandemic and needed opportunities. Unlike the way my children treated me, I treated her with respect, paid her a fair salary, gave her medical benefits, and provided her with a comfortable room on the property. I wanted to show that economic power didn't have to turn people into heartless monsters. My interviews on international television continued to generate impact. I appeared on Oprah, Ellen, and several CNN specials. My story inspired millions of older women who felt invisible or devalued by their families. I received thousands of letters from women telling me their own experiences with unrecognized maternal sacrifice. I founded a foundation called Invisible Mothers that offered legal and financial support to older women who had been abandoned or financially abused by their adult children. The response was overwhelming. Apparently, my situation was much more common than society wanted to admit. After 2 months of forced labor, my children requested a meeting. They wanted to show me they were changing, that they had learned the lesson. I received them in my new house, in the main living room overlooking the garden. It was important that they see the contrast between my new prosperous life and the modest circumstances in which they now lived. They arrived tired, with cracked hands, stained work clothes, and a humility I had never seen in them. Max spoke first. "Mom, these 2 months have been the hardest of our lives. We've understood what your work meant, the sacrifice you made for us. We never really appreciated it." Sarah added, this time with genuine tears. "Theresa, I know I was cruel to you. I know I treated you as if you were worth less than us. Now that I work in the kitchen and see how hard this work is, I understand that I should never have looked down on what you did." Leon, the most broken of the three, could barely speak. "Mom, forgive me. I was a coward who abandoned you when you needed me most. I don't know if you can ever fully forgive me, but I want you to know that every day I work, I think about how to repair the damage I caused you." I listened to them silently, judging whether their words were sincere or just another desperate manipulation. Time would tell. 6 months after that meeting, something had truly changed in my children. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion from hard work, but a deeper transformation of their character. Max had developed genuine humility he had never possessed. When he cleaned the offices, he greeted all employees respectfully, from executives to security guards. He had learned that honest work, whatever it was, deserved respect. Sarah had become one of the Terrace's most dedicated employees. The chefs respected her because she never complained. She came early and stayed until everything was perfectly clean. She had learned to appreciate every dollar she earned because now she knew exactly how much effort it cost to get it. Leon had found an unexpected calling in maintenance. He discovered that he had manual skills he had never developed and genuine satisfaction in repairing broken things. His co-workers respected him because despite his university education, He didn't consider himself superior. But the most significant change occurred when they began their community work in senior homes. Seeing people my age who had been abandoned by their families showed them a painful mirror of what they had almost done to me. Max told me with tears in his eyes about a 70-year-old gentleman who waited for visits that never came, about a lady who kept photos of children who hadn't called her in years. One Sunday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from the director of the senior home where they volunteered. "Mrs. Theresa," she told me, "I must tell you something extraordinary. Your children have informally adopted several of our residents. Max comes on weekends to play chess with Mr. Miller, who hasn't had a visitor in 3 years. Sarah teaches Mrs. Meyer to cook, who is very depressed. Leon repairs the residents' personal belongings without anyone asking him to." This information moved me more than I expected. It wasn't a show to impress me because they thought I wouldn't find out. It was genuine change resulting from their direct experience with elderly neglect. 8 months after the restaurant incident, I decided to do something I hadn't planned. I invited them to dinner at my new house, not at the Terrace, not on neutral ground, but in my home. When they arrived, I immediately noticed how they had physically changed. They were thinner but stronger. Their skin was tanned from outdoor work. Their hands were calloused but confident. Joanna prepared a simple but delicious dinner. During the meal, we talked like we hadn't in years. They told me about their jobs, about the people they had met, about the lessons they had learned. There was no pretense, no lies, no attempts. These were real conversations between real people. Max asked me for forgiveness again, but this time it was different. "Mom," he said, "I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I need your money or because I want to return to my former life. I'm asking for your forgiveness because I finally understand the damage I caused you. I understand that I stole the dignity you earned with 40 years of sacrifice." Sarah added something that surprised me. "Theresa, I've been thinking about changing my career. I want to officially study culinary arts. Working in your restaurant's kitchen showed me a passion I didn't know I had. I don't want to be the superficial woman I used to be anymore." Leon was the most honest of all. "Mom, I know I'll probably never fully regain your trust, but I want you to know that these months have been the first in my adult life where I'm proud of who I am. Honest work has given me self-worth I never had when I lived off your money." At the end of dinner, I made a decision I had been thinking about for weeks. I told them they could stop working in my businesses if they wanted. They had fulfilled 8 of the 12 months I had originally set, but their transformation was evident. To my surprise, however, all 3 asked to continue. Max wanted to keep working as a janitor until he completed the full year. Sarah asked to stay in the Terrace's kitchen while she studied culinary arts. Leon wanted to continue the maintenance work because he had found his true calling. 1 year after the incident that changed our lives forever, we had a real family dinner. This time at the Terrace, but in the restaurant kitchen, not in the elegant dining room. Sarah cooked for us. Leon had repaired the table we ate at, and Max had polished every surface until it gleamed. It wasn't a completely magical reconciliation. Deep wounds need time to heal completely, but it was a genuine beginning. For the first time in decades, I had dinner with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. That night, on my way home to my villa, I thought about the past year. I had lost children who were really strangers, but I had found real people worth knowing. I had lost emotional parasites, but I had gained a family that had earned the right to exist. I didn't regret raising them. I only regretted not understanding sooner that kindness should never be exercised at the cost of self-destruction. That true maternal love sometimes requires painful lessons to create worthy people. At 70 years old, I had learned that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. The first weeks were brutal for them. Their bodies weren't used to intense physical labor. Max complained of back pain from bending over to mop floors. Sarah cried secretly because of burns from hot oil on her arms. Leon developed calluses on hands that had previously only known computer keyboards. But the hardest part wasn't the physical work, but the constant social humiliation. The Terrace's customers recognized Sarah from the viral videos, and some took photos of her washing dishes. The images circulated on social media with mocking comments about how the woman who considered herself too elegant for her mother-in-law had fallen. Max faced the morbid curiosity of his ex-colleagues. Some walked by the building just to see him mopping, to confirm that the successful bank manager was really working as a janitor now. His photos appeared in WhatsApp groups with messages like, "Look how the one who threw his mother out of the restaurant ended up." Leon wasn't spared either. People who knew him from university days saw him in his maintenance uniform, carrying toolboxes and climbing ladders. The whispers followed him everywhere. "Isn't that Leon? The one who wanted to put his mother in a home? Now he's fixing toilets." The social humiliation was constant, relentless. Every day brought new reminders of how far they had fallen. Every mocking comment, every pitying look, every photograph shared online was another lesson in the consequences of their cruelty. But something began to change around the 3rd month. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but gradual and genuine. Max started arriving at work 15 minutes early, not because he was required to, but because he wanted to do his job well. He began taking pride in the gleaming floors, in the spotless windows, in the perfectly organized supply closets. When his supervisor complimented his work, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: genuine satisfaction in a job well done. Sarah stopped crying in the kitchen storage room during her breaks. She began watching the chefs with genuine interest, asking questions, learning techniques. The head chef, initially dismissive of the spoiled rich girl, began to notice her dedication. "You have potential," he told her one day. "If you keep this up, you might actually become a real cook." Leon discovered he had a natural talent for fixing things. The initial frustration gave way to satisfaction when he successfully repaired a complex plumbing problem or restored an old electrical system. His supervisor, a gruff man named Tom who had worked maintenance for 30 years, began treating him with respect. "You're not bad, kid. You actually care about doing it right." But the most significant transformation began when they started their mandatory community service at the senior homes. The first day was a shock to all 3 of them. They entered expecting to fulfill an obligation, to check a box on my list of requirements. Instead, they encountered a reality they had never truly considered. Max was assigned to spend time with Mr. Miller, an 87-year-old former accountant who sat by the window every day, waiting for children who never visited. "They're busy," Mr. Miller would say with a sad smile. "Important jobs, important lives. They don't have time for an old man." The words hit Max like a physical blow. He saw himself in those absent children, saw me in Mr. Miller's lonely vigil by the window. Sarah met Mrs. Meyer, a former teacher who had raised 4 children alone after her husband died young. Her children had moved across the country, promising to visit, but never coming. "I sacrificed everything for them," Mrs. Meyer told Sarah. "My career, my dreams, my youth. I thought that meant something. I thought they would remember." Sarah had to leave the room because she couldn't stop crying. Leon was paired with Mr. Chen, who showed him photos of grandchildren he had never met. "My son says I'm too old-fashioned, that I embarrass them in front of their friends. So they keep the children away from me. I'm not good enough for their modern life." Leon sat with Mr. Chen for hours, looking at those photos, listening to stories about a family that had discarded him, and for the first time, he truly understood what they had done to me. The 2nd month of community service changed them even more profoundly. Max started visiting Mr. Miller on his days off, bringing chess sets and sitting with him for hours. When Mr. Miller's birthday came and no one remembered, Max organized a small party with the other residents. The joy on the old man's face, the tears in his eyes when he realized someone cared, broke something hard and cold in Max's heart. Sarah began teaching informal cooking classes to the residents who were able to participate. Mrs. Meyer was her most enthusiastic student. "You remind me of my daughter when she was young," Mrs. Meyer told her one day. "Before success changed her, before she forgot where she came from." "I was that daughter," Sarah whispered back. "I was exactly that person." Leon spent his weekends fixing things around the senior home without being asked. Broken wheelchairs, faulty heaters, stuck windows. He learned each resident's name, their stories, their heartbreaks. And with each repair, he felt like he was somehow repairing a piece of himself. 6 months into their sentence, something remarkable happened. The transformation wasn't just external anymore. It had become internal, fundamental, real. I received reports from the managers of my businesses. Max was now training new cleaning staff, teaching them the importance of thoroughness, of taking pride in their work regardless of what that work was. His former arrogance had been replaced by genuine humility. Sarah had been promoted from dishwasher to prep cook. The head chef told me, "She has real talent, Mrs. Theresa. More importantly, she has the hunger to learn. She stays late, asks questions, practices. She's not the woman who walked into this kitchen 6 months ago." Leon's supervisor told me, "Your son is the best worker I've had in 10 years. He doesn't complain, he doesn't cut corners, and he treats every job like it matters. He's become someone his co-workers respect." But the most telling changes were the ones I observed personally. I began making unannounced visits to the senior home where they volunteered. Not to check on them, but because the director kept telling me about the remarkable bond they had formed with the residents. One Sunday, I arrived to find Max sitting with Mr. Miller, both men engaged in an intense chess game. But it wasn't the game that struck me. It was the way Max listened when Mr. Miller spoke, the genuine interest in his eyes, the gentle patience when the old man took long minutes to make a move. "Your son saved my life," Mr. Miller told me later. Not literally, but in every way that matters. I was ready to give up, to just fade away. Then he came, and suddenly I had something to look forward to. Someone who actually wanted to hear my stories, who treated me like I still mattered. I found Sarah in the kitchen, teaching Mrs. Meyer how to make bread. Sarah's hands, once manicured and soft, were now work-worn and confident as she guided the elderly woman's arthritic fingers through the dough. "She's like the granddaughter I never had," Mrs. Meyer told me, her eyes bright. "She listens to my old stories. She laughs at my jokes. She makes me feel like I'm still a real person, not just an old woman waiting to die." Leon was in Mr. Chen's room, installing grab bars in the bathroom he had paid for with his own minimum wage earnings. He didn't have to do this, Mr. Chen told me. The home said they couldn't afford it. But Leon, he saved up his paychecks and bought them himself. He said everyone deserves to feel safe in their own bathroom. I stood in that hallway and cried, not tears of sadness, but of something more complex. Hope, perhaps, or recognition that my children weren't lost after all. They had just needed to lose everything to find their true selves. 8 months after the restaurant incident, I invited them to dinner at my villa. I wanted to see them in a different context, away from work, away from the senior home, in the space where I now lived my authentic life. They arrived together, having carpooled because none of them could afford individual cars anymore. They wore simple clothes, clean but not expensive. Their faces showed the marks of hard work, sun-weathered skin, hands that bore calluses and small scars, a tiredness that was physical but somehow healthy. Joanna served dinner, and I watched how my children treated her. Max stood when she entered the room, thanked her for each course. Sarah asked about her grandchildren, remembering their names from a previous conversation. Leon noticed she was limping and immediately offered to look at her car the next day, suspecting a problem with the pedals. These were not the people who had tried to throw me out of a restaurant 8 months ago. These were not the same people who had suggested I belonged at McDonald's. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. They didn't complain about their work or their small apartments. Instead, they talked about the people they had met, the skills they were learning, the satisfaction of earning their own way. "Mom," Max said, his voice quiet but firm. "I want to apologize again, not because I want something from you, but because I finally understand what I'm apologizing for. For 8 months, I've cleaned offices, the same kind of work you did for 40 years, and I'm exhausted after 8 months. You did it for 40 years, for us, and we never even said thank you." Sarah spoke next. "Teresa, I've been thinking about my life before all this. I had everything, money, status, nice things, but I had nothing real, nothing I earned, nothing I could be proud of. Now I wash dishes and prep vegetables, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm proud of what I do, because I'm doing it myself, because I'm actually good at something real." Leon's words were the most emotional. "Mom, you asked me once if I would ever truly change. I didn't know then, but I know now. I'm not the same person. That person died. The person sitting here, he's someone I actually like, someone who knows what hard work means, what real relationships look like, what matters." I listened to them, studying their faces, their body language, their eyes. I was looking for signs of manipulation, of performance, of the false remorse designed to win favor. I found none of that. What I saw was genuine transformation, painful, hard-won, real change. I have a question for each of you, I said. Your 12 months are almost up. You've fulfilled 8 months. I could release you from the remaining obligations. You could look for other jobs, move to different apartments, rebuild your lives without the restrictions I imposed. Do you want that? The silence that followed was profound. They looked at each other, having a silent conversation I couldn't quite read. Max spoke first. No, I want to complete the full year. Not because you're making me, but because I'm not done learning yet. I want to finish what I started. Sarah nodded. I want to stay in the kitchen. I'm actually good at it, Mom. The head chef said he would support me if I wanted to enroll in culinary school. I want to do that. I want to become a real chef, not just someone's wife with a hobby. Leon's answer surprised me most. I want to continue the maintenance work. I found something I never had before. A skill, a purpose, respect I actually earned. I don't want to give that up. I sat back in my chair, processing their words. You understand that if you continue, you'll still face the social judgment, the mockery, the people who know your story. Let them mock, Max said. I'd rather be a janitor people laugh at than a banker who can't look at himself in the mirror. The only people whose opinions matter to me now are the residents at the senior home, Sarah added. Mrs. Meyer told me she's proud of me. That's worth more than any country club membership. I finally know who I am, Leon said simply. I'm not giving that up for anything. That night, after they left, I sat on my terrace looking out over the city lights and realized something profound. I had set out to punish them, to teach them a lesson about respect and consequences. But somewhere along the way, I had given them something more valuable than punishment. I had given them the opportunity to discover who they truly were beneath the privilege, beneath the entitlement, beneath the shallow values they had constructed their lives around. They had lost everything: money, status, comfort, ease. And in losing everything, they had found something worth keeping: their authentic selves, their integrity, their humanity. The question now was whether this transformation would last, whether the lessons would stick when the formal sentence ended and they had to choose their own paths without my oversight. Only time would tell. But for the first time in 40 years, I looked at my children and felt something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. 5 years have passed since that night that forever changed the course of our lives. Today, as I write these lines from my study overlooking the garden I love so much, I can say with certainty that the most difficult decision of my life was also the most liberating. Max never returned to the banking world. After completing his year as a janitor, he decided to study hotel management and now runs 2 of my smaller properties. Not because I gave it to him, but because he earned it from the ground up, learning every aspect of the business. His employees respect him because he knows exactly what every task he asks of them means. He divorced Sarah 2 years ago, not out of resentment, but because they had both changed so much that they were no longer compatible. She had found her passion in culinary arts, and he had discovered that he valued simplicity over social appearances. It was an amicable separation between 2 people who had evolved in different directions. Sarah completed her degree as a professional chef and is now the head chef at the Terrace. Her transformation was the most dramatic of all. The woman who once mocked my clothing now proudly wears her kitchen uniform, stained with sweat and honest work. Her dishes have received national recognition, and several important restaurants have offered her better paid positions. But she prefers to stay where she learned the true value of work. She married one of the restaurant's suppliers, a simple man who appreciates her dedication and her story of redemption. They have a small daughter, Clara, who is my first real granddaughter, not because she's biologically the first, but because she's the firstborn into a family that understands the value of genuine relationships. Leon found his soulmate in community service. He met a social worker named Carmen at one of the senior homes where he volunteered. They married a year ago in a simple ceremony filled with love. Together, they opened a maintenance company specializing in adapting homes for elderly people. Their work gives them purpose and allows them to earn enough to live with dignity. I now have 3 more grandchildren. Leon and Carmen's children, 2-year-old twins who fill my house with laughter when they come for Sunday lunch. Seeing Leon as a father has shown me the man he could always have been, but whom circumstances never allowed to develop. My Invisible Mothers Foundation has expanded internationally. We have offices in 12 countries and have helped over 10,000 elderly women reclaim their dignity and their rights. The case I'm most proud of is that of an 80-year-old lady in Colombia whose children had put her in a home against her will to keep her house. Our lawyers not only recovered her property, but also created a legal precedent that protects other elderly people in similar situations. I've written 3 books about my experiences. The first, The Invisible Maid, became an international bestseller and was adapted as a Netflix series. The rights to the story brought in millions of dollars, which go directly to the foundation. It's ironic to think that the story of my humiliation became the source of dignity for thousands of other women. Joanna, my domestic worker, became much more than that. She's my housemate, my confidant, my chosen family. When her grandchildren visit, my house fills with a joy I never experienced when my own children were small, because this is a relationship based on mutual respect, not obligation or guilt. At 74 years old, my health is excellent. I do yoga every morning in my garden, swim in my pool, and travel frequently to give lectures on dignity and old age and healthy family relationships. I have more energy now than when I worked as a domestic worker, because I'm finally living for myself, not just for others. My children and I have dinner together once a month, not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoy each other's company. Our conversations are real, our laughter is honest, and our love is earned, not taken for granted. When Clara calls me Grandma, with that smile that lights up her whole face, I feel a connection I never had with the abstract notion of being a grandmother. The restaurant where it all began has become a symbol of second chances. We have a policy of hiring people who have faced difficulties, single mothers, older people who lost their jobs, former prisoners trying to reintegrate into society. The Terrace isn't just a thriving business. It's a community of people who understand the value of earned dignity. Elijah, my trusted business partner, retired last year. At his farewell party, he told me something I'll never forget. Theresa, in 15 years of working with you, I never saw the poor domestic worker you pretended to be. I always saw the intelligent businesswoman you really were. I just hoped that one day you would see her too. I have completely forgiven my children, but not because I forgot what happened. I forgave them because they chose to change, because they worked hard to earn that forgiveness, because they became people who deserve my love and respect. Forgiveness wasn't a free gift. It was the result of years of sincere effort on their part. My lawyers suggested I change my will to include my children again. I decided to leave them a portion of my wealth, but the majority will still go to the foundation. They learned to live with their own resources, and that independence made them stronger. This morning, while I was having breakfast on my terrace, I thought about the question all the journalists ask me. Do I regret having taken such drastic measures? The answer is still no. Sometimes true love requires decisions that seem cruel but are necessary for growth. I don't regret raising them. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be exercised at the cost of self-destruction, that respect isn't automatically given for being a mother. It must be earned through consistent actions, and it's never too late to demand the dignity you deserve. To new mothers, I always say, love your children enough to teach them that relationships require reciprocity, that love without respect is disguised manipulation, and that your worth as a person doesn't depend on how much sacrifice you're willing to make. Today, I am a whole woman, not just a sacrificing mother. 1 year after the restaurant incident that changed our lives forever, we held a real family dinner. This time at the Terrace, but in the restaurant kitchen, not in the elegant dining room. Sarah cooked for us. Leon had repaired the table we ate at, and Max had polished every surface until it gleamed. It wasn't a completely magical reconciliation. Deep wounds need time to heal completely, but it was a genuine beginning. For the first time in decades, I had dinner with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. That night, on my way home to my villa, I thought about the past year. I had lost children who were really strangers, but I had found real people worth knowing. I had lost emotional parasites, but I had gained a family that had earned the right to exist. I didn't regret raising them. I only regretted not understanding sooner that kindness should never be exercised at the cost of self-destruction, that true maternal love sometimes requires painful lessons to create worthy people. At 70 years old, I had learned that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. 5 years later, as I sit in my garden watching Clara chase butterflies while the twins play with their toy trucks, I realize that this is what family truly means. Not blood obligation, but chosen love. Not automatic respect, but earned trust. Not sacrifice that destroys, but support that uplifts. Max arrives for Sunday lunch, carrying a briefcase full of hotel reports he wants to discuss with me. Not because he needs my approval, but because he values my business insight. We've become genuine partners, equals collaborating on projects that matter to both of us. Sarah brings a new dessert she's been perfecting, eager for honest feedback. She doesn't need my praise to feel worthy anymore, but she appreciates my opinion because she knows it comes from respect, not manipulation. Leon and Carmen arrive last, apologizing because they were helping Mrs. Meyer move into a new accessible apartment their company designed. They're exhausted but happy, glowing with the satisfaction of meaningful work. We gather around the table, 3 generations united not by obligation, but by authentic connection. Clara insists on sitting next to me, and as she chatters about her preschool adventures, I catch Max's eye across the table. He smiles, and in that smile I see everything. The pain of the past, the hard work of transformation, the gratitude for second chances, the peace of genuine redemption. Thank you. Mom, he says quietly, so only I can hear, for not giving up on us, for loving us enough to demand we become better people. I squeeze his hand. Thank you for being willing to change. Not everyone is. As the afternoon sun filters through the garden, casting golden light on our imperfect, hard-won, beautifully real family, I understand something profound. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending the hurt never happened. It's not about making excuses for unacceptable behavior. True forgiveness is witnessing genuine transformation and choosing to embrace it. It's recognizing when someone has done the grueling work of becoming a better person and honoring that journey. My children didn't just apologize. They fundamentally changed who they were. They didn't just say sorry. They spent years proving they meant it through consistent action, through humility, through service to others, through discovering their own worth independent of my money. That's what makes reconciliation possible. Not words, but sustained, authentic change. As Clara tugs on my sleeve, asking me to read her a story, I realize I'm writing a new ending. Not just for my own story, but for all the invisible mothers who sacrifice in silence, believing that endless giving is the only way to prove their love. To them, I want to say this: your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice. Your value isn't determined by how much others take from you. You deserve respect, dignity, and reciprocity. And if those you love cannot see your worth, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them fall. Let them struggle. Let them face consequences. Because sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. My children lost their money, their status, their comfort, their easy lives. And in that loss, they found their integrity, their work ethic, their compassion, their authentic selves. They lost everything and gained what money could never buy: character, humility, genuine relationships, and self-respect. As I watch them now, laughing together, helping each other, loving each other not out of obligation, but genuine affection, I know that the hardest thing I ever did was also the best thing. I didn't just demand respect. I created the conditions for them to become people worthy of respect, and that, ultimately, is what true love looks like. Not enabling, not sacrificing yourself into nothing, not accepting cruelty in the name of family loyalty. True love sets boundaries. True love demands reciprocity. True love says, I love you enough to let you face the consequences of your choices. True love doesn't give up on people, but it also doesn't allow them to remain their worst selves. At 74, I've learned that you can't force people to change. You can only create the conditions where change becomes possible, and then step back to see if they choose to walk through that door. My children walked through that door. They chose change when they could have chosen resentment. They chose humility when they could have chosen pride. They chose growth when they could have chosen to play the victim. And because they made those choices consistently, day after day, for years, we now have something worth having. A real family, built on respect, honesty, and genuine love. As the sun sets on another Sunday, casting long shadows across my garden, I feel something I never expected to feel at this stage of my life. Peace. Complete. Profound. Hard-won peace. And gratitude. Gratitude for the hard lessons that led to genuine transformation. Gratitude for the courage to demand better, even when it hurt. Gratitude for children who chose to rise to the challenge instead of running from it. But most of all, gratitude for finally understanding my own worth, independent of anyone else's recognition. Because at the end of the day, that's what this story is really about. Not revenge, not punishment, but a 70-year-old woman finally claiming the dignity she deserved all along and teaching her children, through the hardest possible lessons, that dignity, real dignity, can never be given or taken away. It can only be earned. If you liked my story, you can encourage me to write more stories by sending me a donation. I thank you infinitely, M.